Take a moment to imagine you have a cookie sitting right in front of you. Assuming you actually want to eat that cookie, how would you go about doing so? Would you try to shove that cookie down your throat in one gulp? Would you smash that cookie up into 100 different pieces and kind of pick up the pieces, the little crumbs as you go? Or do you prefer to have or do you prefer to have 3 to 4 bites that are digestible and enjoyable? Well, speeches are a lot like cookies. Our goal as speakers is to craft a digestible speech that allows our audience to follow the main points so it doesn't feel like we're shoving a whole bunch of information down their throats at one time, and it also doesn't feel like we have a whole bunch of scattered thoughts. We are trying to come up with 3 or 4 main points that are easy for our audience to digest and remember. And fortunately, we have one critical tool that we can use to help ensure that our speech is a digestible speech, and that is our outline. In my experience as a public speaking instructor, it is those students who have crafted outlines and spent time developing that outline that end up doing the best in their speech. Their speech is more memorable, it's more organized, it's easier to follow. And so it is a critical tool for us to learn how to create those outlines. And so in this video, we're going to talk about the characteristics of an outline, the different types of an outline, and then all the different parts of your speech that should appear on that outline to ensure that it is an organized speech. So first we need to know the different types of outlines. There are actually 2 main types of outlines, the preparation outline and the speaking outline. And we'll start with the preparation outline, as this is what you do before your speech. It is what allows you to get ready for the speech, to ensure you have the information that you need, and so we'll start there. Your preparation outline should contain full sentences and full thoughts. You're really trying to get everything down on paper or on your computer that you want to say in that speech. We also want to make sure that we're writing out oral citations. In speeches, our audience can't see our resource page or they can't see our references, so we need to tell them our references and why those references are qualified. So name your sources, explain why the audience should trust the source. This can be as simple as saying something like, according to a recent article in the New York Times, or it can be something like, according to Dr. John Smith, who studied this issue extensively, and then explain what the doctor had found in that study. So we want to make sure that we're writing full sentences, writing out our oral citations, and we're also using reverse indentations. And so our main points, our topic points, are not indented at all. They appear like right on the edge of the paper. But then underneath that, we are indenting our supporting material, our personal examples, all the things that we believe supports that main point. And the reason that we do this is so we can visualize which main points that we have the most support, which ones have the least amount of support. If we see that there is one main point and it doesn't have any evidence underneath it, we know we need to go find some additional supporting material. Or if we see a main point and is like 3 pages long, has tons and tons of evidence, we might think, oh, that probably should be broken up into smaller points, or we just need to make some choices and remove some of the evidence that we have. Conversely, your speaking outline is what you use as you're giving your presentation. When we had the preparation outline, we were thinking the full sentence, the full idea. But in the speaking outline, we're trying to get down to key words and key phrases. We might include, for accuracy, the full quotation of someone else's, but we are really trying to think of what is the bare minimum I need to put down on this piece of paper or on these note cards for me to remember what I wanted to say. And there you do have a choice. You can use either note cards or you can use a piece of paper or papers to have your speaking outline. I encourage you to practice with either one to see how it feels and which one you like the best. But regardless of what your choice is, remember, keywords, key phrases, we're really trying to think of, can I look down, see this word, see this key phrase, and remember what I wanted to say, what point I wanted to make with that keyword or key phrase. And then a quick tip, as you are moving from your preparation outline to your speaking outline, you don't have to just do one big jump. You can slowly start removing words, phrases from your preparation outline to create that speaking outline, and that would help you remember what you wanted to say. And so now that we know a little bit about the 2 different types of outlines, let's discuss what you should be placing in those outlines, the parts of the speech. And so there are 4 parts of the speech that should appear on your outline: the introduction, the body or the main points, the transitions, and then also the conclusion. Now, when you're actually writing your speech, you do not need to start with the introduction. Oftentimes, it's actually easier to work on your main points and finish the body of the speech before you go back and figure out what you're going to be introducing. But for the sake of this video, we're going to start there with the introduction. Now, the introduction itself has 4 components that we need to think about: our hook or attention-getting device, our credibility statement, our thesis, and our preview. Your speech will start with an attention-getting device, so we'll start there. Now, the attention-getting device is the key moment where you're convincing your audience that they should continue listening to your speech, that they should pay attention to what you are saying. Everybody has a lot going on in their life, and so your attention-getting device is answering the question, why should I take some time to listen to this speech now? And you should really be trying to provide an answer to that as early as you can. So think back to the beginning of this video. In this video, I used an attention-getting device around the metaphor of the cookie, right? Imagine that you're about to eat a cookie. Do you want to shove that down your throat or not? I also tried to show and argue that there was a key reason you should watch this video based off of being a better speaker by knowing how to outline. Those were the kind of hooks, the ways I was trying to get you invested in this video. Other common attention-getting devices include stating the stakes of the issue. So let's imagine you're watching a video and the person said, did you know you can make $1,000 a day just sitting at home? That might grab your attention because of the stakes, that you could be getting $1,000 that you're not getting, and that's a pretty big stake for a lot of us. Other speakers use things like shocking statistics that grab your attention and make you want to know more about that topic or that startling statistic. Others use open-ended questions where they get you to start thinking about something, and if they're getting you to think about something, then you're more invested. And quoting famous people is another common strategy for grabbing people's attention. A few others I wanted to talk about. The first is kind of telling a story, but not giving away the ending of that story, right? We're creating suspense and we're creating intrigue by telling the beginning of something and then waiting until the end of the speech to actually finish that story. So create moments of suspense in your introduction to get the audience to continue wanting to watch. And finally, this is kind of double duty. You can use personal anecdotes. Tell a story about how you relate to the topic that can both grab the audience's attention because they're relating to that story. They want to know the rest of the story, but that is also developing credibility as you're sharing with your audience your expertise on the topic. And that is a great segue into the second part of our introduction, which is our credibility statement. Now think ethos, ethos, ethos as you're thinking about the credibility statement. In order for audiences to want to continue listening to us, they need to believe that we're trustworthy, that we care for them, those components of ethos. And so this is your first effort in your speech to show your audience you know what you're talking about, that you care for them, that you have good moral character, or whatever it may be. Now, there's a few ways that you can do this. Again, telling a personal story is a good way to show your expertise on the topic. You also might just talk about when you became interested in the topic and explain to the audience why you became interested in this particular topic. You also might talk about why you thought the topic was so important for the audience, right? You can show that you care for the audience by saying, when I saw this shocking statistic, for example, I knew that it was important to talk about this issue with as many people as I can. So for me in this video, my credibility statement was something to the effect of, for the last 10 years, I've been teaching public speaking. And so that shows my expertise, my credential in terms of explaining why outlining and organization are so important to speaking. And then after you boost your ethos, you're going to want to focus on clearly communicating the main argument or the thesis of your speech. Ask yourself this: what is the main takeaway from your presentation? Or maybe think of it this way: if your audience was asked to summarize your speech in a sentence or two, or what the main takeaway of your speech was in a sentence or two, what would you want them to say? And the answer to those questions should be your thesis, the main argument that you're trying to persuade the audience of, or you're trying to convey to the audience throughout your speech. And then once you have that thesis statement, you're going to tell your audience how you plan on developing that argument and convincing them that that thesis statement is true. And that's your preview, where you're saying what is going to happen in the rest of the speech and in what order. So you might quickly preview the first, second, third main points of your speech. It is important when you're previewing that you state the topic or the ideas you're going to talk about in the order that you are going to talk about them. So if you're going to talk about your first main point first, it should be the first thing you mention in the preview, and so on. And now you have your introduction, you have your attention getter, your credibility statement, your thesis statement, and your preview. It's now time to move on and think about the body and the main points that we are going to develop. Now, the body of our speech is where we really develop our arguments. This is where we're going to be citing the vast majority of our evidence, our research, and our supporting material. We really want to make sure that as we are developing each and every main point that we are asking ourselves, do we have enough evidence to really show and demonstrate that our point is correct? Another thing to think about is that your main points should be discrete. And by that, I mean each main point should only cover one thing. Sometimes, right, when we're trying to put together our arguments, we kind of smash some of the arguments together or the pieces together, and that can lead to confusion. So really think, am I only talking about one argument in this main point? And am I only developing one argument? So for example, if you had a speech and it was going to be about cancer, and you had a point about how cancer affects everybody and about how cancer can be costly, you would not want to have a main point that says, cancer affects everybody and is costly, because you're smashing the two ideas together. And so you might lack evidence, for example, for the point about how it's costly. And as you're finishing up your main points, really review to make sure that you have clear claims and supporting evidence. And if you do, you're good to go. The next step for you then will be to start adding in your transitions. And now transitions are the glue that hold the speech together. We really want to have words and phrases that signal that we're moving on to another point so our audience can connect the different points together. So good transitions then separate the points and guide our audience from one point to the other point. And the best transitions contain review and preview in order to do that. And so by the review part, I mean that the transition will wink or nod to the point that you just developed. And then the preview point is that you're going to start to get your audience to think about the next point that you're going to make. And so a good example of this might be if you're giving a speech about a certain problem and you want to propose a solution. Let's say, for example, that you're giving a speech about the issue of heat exhaustion. And so in your speech, you might have a moment that's like, now that you know the consequences of heat exhaustion, we can focus on the individual solutions to prevent it. And so there you have the review part, now that we know the consequences of heat exhaustion, and the preview part. Now we can talk about the solutions to heat exhaustion. And so those kinds of transitions work really well because they connect the points together and show the relationship of the points while keeping them separate. Other things you can do to help with your transitions is first to use signal words. So now, then, next, afterward, like those kinds of words help signal to the audience that we're moving on to something else. And second, you can use what I just did, numbers, right? State first, second, third, fourth. Have numbers so your audience can follow the points that you're trying to make. And those numbers really signal to your audience both how many points that you have and also when you're starting a new point. And then after you add in those transitions, it's really time to think about the conclusion. The conclusion has three components that we want to think about as we're developing our speech. The first component is the signal to the end. Now, let's be honest, as you're listening to a speech, sometimes we get distracted. Audience members might be thinking about another errand that they have after you finish the speech. Maybe something you said distracted them and got them to think about one of their personal experiences. And so the signal to the end is really trying to grab our audience's attention one more time to get them to listen to the last bit of our speech. And so we want to use words and emphasize words like in conclusion or in summary to grab the audience's attention back for the final thing that we're going to say. And one of those final things is our summary. That's the second part of the conclusion. In the summary, we want to restate the main points that we've had. A kind of general consensus is that it takes 3 times hearing something for it really to start to stick. And so in your speech, you're going to tell your audience your points 3 times. The first in your preview, the second as you develop them in the body, and then here in the summary of the conclusion. Once you have your summary written, we can move to the final aspect of our speech, which is the closing statement. Now, when we think of the closing statement, I want us to think about the attention-getting device. And so the closing statement should be something that is memorable, that will linger with our audience after our speech. One of the easy ways to do this is to really connect our closing statement with our attention-getting device. So for example, if you had a shocking statistic right at the beginning of your speech, maybe at the end of your speech, you bring that shocking statistic back, but then say, now the audience is more equipped to deal with that statistic. Or if you have that gripping story that is incomplete in the introduction, you then can finish that on a positive note in the end. And so let's say you end on a cliffhanger, right? You start with a little story, the character is about to face something really negative, you give the rest of your speech, and then you end with, And fortunately, that character knew the stuff in this speech, so they're able to get out of that challenging situation. And there you have it, outlining and the anatomy of your speech. Now you have the tools to prepare an organized speech that will hopefully help your audience digest all of the arguments that you're trying to make and make your arguments that much more persuasive, that much more memorable. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.